Today we're going to talk about an essential resource for human existence, one for which civilizations have competed since ancient times. A natural asset increasingly demanded by countless productive sectors, and at the same time, progressively limited. The rise in this demand, combined with the impacts of climate change and certain irresponsible human actions, has turned water into an increasingly valuable resource with constantly rising prices. But after all, why is water becoming increasingly scarce? What consequences could this bring to society? Are we heading toward water conflicts instead of oil wars? And could you somehow benefit from this scenario? So get comfortable, because we're going to explore all of this right now. It's widely known that a human being can survive about a month without food, but cannot last more than 3 days without water. The good news is that our planet is made up of approximately 70% water. The major obstacle, however, is that 97% of that is salt water. And of the remaining 3%, 2/3 are trapped in polar glaciers. This means that only 1% of the water available on Earth is fresh and liquid, the kind we use for almost everything. Most of this accessible water is found in underground aquifers, which are difficult to exploit. That's why, since ancient times, people have always sought to settle near rivers, lakes, or surface water sources. This explains why most of the world's great cities, both ancient and modern, have emerged near bodies of water. And the reason is simple. Humans need to drink. According to the World Health Organization, a healthy person needs about 35 milliliters of water per kilogram of body weight every day. In other words, someone weighing 50 kilograms requires about 1.7 liters of water daily, while a person weighing 70 kilograms consumes around 2.4 liters. Besides quenching thirst, water is essential for personal hygiene, household cleaning, and other basic activities. Although these needs account for only 8% of global water use, the majority of fresh water consumed on the planet is used by industry. Sectors such as steel and metallurgy use large volumes to cool their machinery and prevent overheating. In mining and energy production, enormous quantities of water are employed to move turbines, refine minerals, and generate electricity. Another sector that demands a lot of water is the semiconductor industry, responsible for manufacturing the microchips found in virtually all electronic devices. The tiny components of these chips require washes with extremely pure water, free of any impurities. To produce this ultra-pure water, large volumes of conventional potable water are needed. For example, in 2019, Intel's factories consumed over 3 times the amount of water used by Ford's plants. However, the largest consumer of fresh water in the world is the agricultural sector. To produce a single cup of coffee, about 130 liters of water are consumed throughout the production process. A single banana demands 160 liters. And if you buy a kilo of cheese, know that this represents the use of over 5,000 liters of water. But the biggest culprit is the meat industry. To produce an ordinary hamburger, around 1,650 liters of water are required, since cattle consume enormous quantities of feed and forage, which in turn need water to be cultivated. Still, the sector responsible for approximately 70% of all the fresh water consumed by humanity is agriculture. According to data from the World Bank, more than 330 million hectares of farmland have irrigation systems. And the situation is likely to worsen as the world's population keeps growing and is expected to reach 10 billion people by 2050. This means not only more people needing to drink water, but also a higher demand for food, which will further intensify water use in agricultural production. Much of this population growth will occur in regions like Africa, India, Indonesia, and the Middle East, areas already facing serious water shortage problems. This reality has caused global water consumption to increase rapidly in recent years, and the trend is expected to continue over the coming decades. At the same time, the main underground aquifers are being depleted. The math is simple. More people and more industrial and agricultural activities mean more water consumption, leading to a scenario of scarcity. If the world's population keeps growing as projected by the United Nations, reaching 12 billion inhabitants by 2100, the price of water will continue to rise year after year. And the problem doesn't stop there. Global warming is causing severe droughts in various parts of the world, while desertification advances into new areas, driven by high temperatures and a lack of rainfall. Making matters worse, countries have shown little willingness to collaborate with each other and share their water resources, both out of selfishness and due to a lack of infrastructure for doing so. For this reason, in many developed countries, there's still enormous water waste, irrigating crops in dry and hard-to-cultivate areas. One of the clearest examples of waste and lack of collective responsibility is the proliferation of golf courses built in desert regions. The United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, for example, are filled with these facilities. And even though some use more efficient irrigation systems, the amount of water consumed to maintain these courses is, at the very least, questionable. Additionally, it's worth remembering that water distribution networks in most countries are highly inefficient. Governments around the world have neglected for years the necessary investments to modernize and maintain their water infrastructure. As a result, in countries like Mexico, where water supply is already limited, up to 40% of the water is lost before reaching its destination, leaking through old and poorly maintained pipes. And this problem isn't restricted to developing nations. In 2016, Spain wasted 16.3% of all the water it collected for consumption. To make matters worse, rivers, lakes, and aquifers in many places have been polluted, requiring expensive and complex purification processes before the water can be used by the population. In short, the situation is alarming. The major challenge is that, as this is a long-term issue concerning global security, it's rarely treated as a priority by governments, which tend to focus on more immediate matters and short-term crises. Because of this, solutions to this challenge are often postponed. Even so, a few alternatives could help minimize the approaching water crisis. Expansion of desalination plants. One viable solution would be to convert the salt water from the oceans into drinking water. Although it's technically possible, desalination plants currently represent just 1% of the world's water supply. Additionally, they are expensive and require large amounts of energy to operate, making their large-scale adoption difficult in the short term. However, with the advancement of renewable energy sources, this option could become more feasible in the future. Rational and efficient water use. While modern technology demands considerable volumes of water, it also allows for more efficient usage, especially in agriculture. There are already advanced irrigation systems that provide each plant with exactly the amount of water it needs, reducing waste. The obstacle, however, is the high cost of these systems, which limits their use to a small portion of farms in developed countries. Modernizing water supply networks. Another path would be to invest heavily in improving urban and rural water distribution infrastructures, minimizing losses during transport. In addition, strengthening environmental legislation to protect rivers, lakes, and soil from pollution would help preserve water reserves, especially in places like India, where about 70% of the available fresh water is already contaminated. Creating international agreements and global standards. It's crucial to establish rules and treaties between countries to promote the responsible and cooperative use of water. Examples such as the Great Lakes Compact in the United States or agreements related to the Nile River in Africa show that regional partnerships are possible. This could help prevent future armed conflicts over water control, a resource that is gradually becoming as valuable as gold or oil. Even with these initiatives, the future scenario remains a concern. So if you believe the trend is for water to continue increasing in value, it might be worth considering a few ways to invest in this sector. The most accessible way is to allocate resources into an ETF that tracks the performance of major water sector companies. One of the best known is the iShares Global Water UCITS ETF, which brings together the 50 largest companies in the industry worldwide, and over the past 10 years has delivered an average annual return of over 10%. For those who prefer more specific options, there's American Water Works, a leader in the US and Canada in providing and maintaining drinking water infrastructure. Operating in a highly regulated market, the company has proven to be a relatively stable option, and, since its IPO in 2008, has delivered excellent results to its investors. Another alternative is to invest in companies responsible for building and operating desalination plants, such as Veolia, which has more than 2,300 projects spread across over 100 countries and processes around 13 million cubic meters of water daily. A highlight is the Sydney plant in Australia, which supplies 15% of the city's needs. However, it's worth noting that despite its importance, the company's profits in recent years have been modest. Finally, an interesting option for those with larger capital would be to acquire land with good water availability, especially in arid regions or areas subject to rapid desertification. And that's it. We've reached the end of today's video. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Big hugs, and see you in the next video.